There were exactly 3 things I knew to be true about Declan Reeves. 1. He took his coffee black, no sugar, which said everything about him and nothing good. 2. He had never once, in the 8 months I had worked as his personal assistant, said thank you to me. Not once. And yet every morning I showed up with his coffee, his dry cleaning, his complicated lunch order that his nutritionist emailed me every Sunday night like clockwork, and whatever files he needed before his first meeting. I showed up, and I did all of it with a smile because I was either deeply professional or deeply unwell. Probably both. And 3, I was absolutely catastrophically, embarrassingly in love with him. Not the sweet kind either. Not the butterflies and stolen glances kind. Well, actually it was exactly that kind, which was the most humiliating part. I noticed everything. The way he loosened his tie exactly halfway through every afternoon like clockwork. The way he pressed 2 fingers to his temple when a meeting was going badly. The way the corner of his mouth twitched, just barely, just for a fraction of a second. Whenever I said something that almost made him laugh, before he caught himself and smoothed his expression back into that cool, unreadable mask he wore like a second skin. 8 months of this. 8 months of being invisible. Liam. His voice came through the intercom, and I nearly knocked my entire coffee off my desk. Yes. I straightened immediately, pressing the button like I hadn't just been sitting here staring at the wall thinking about the way he said my name. My 2 o'clock moved to 1:30. Fix it. Already done, I said, because it was. I had caught the email 12 minutes ago, rescheduled the conference room, notified the 3 other attendees, and updated his calendar. All before he even noticed. The intercom clicked off. No thank you. Not even an acknowledgement. Just silence and the distant sound of him returning to whatever very important thing occupied his very important mind. I slumped back in my chair. Pathetic. Truly, genuinely, deeply pathetic. The thing was, and I had never said this out loud to anyone except Finn, and even then only after 2 glasses of wine, Declan Reeves was not just handsome in the regular way. He was handsome in the way that felt almost aggressive. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends when it got long enough, which he always seemed faintly irritated about. He had this jaw that could cut glass, and these gray eyes that looked straight through you like you were made of smoke. He wore his suits like they were designed specifically for his body, which knowing him they probably were, and he moved through every room like he had already decided he owned it. He was also objectively kind of terrible. Not cruel. Never cruel. Just demanding and exacting and completely unbothered by the fact that other people had feelings and nerve endings and hearts that did stupid, inconvenient things. He expected perfection, and he expected it quietly, and he expected it without being asked. And somehow, that quality which should have made me like him less only made me worse. I was a disaster. A fully functional, extremely competent, completely love-struck disaster. My phone buzzed on my desk that I got a text from Finn. Happy birthday, baby. Don't tell me you're at your desk right now. Liam, I swear to God. I smiled despite myself and typed back. I'm at my desk, I replied. I'm coming to get you at 6, and you will have fun tonight whether you like it or not. Also, I got you something. You're going to die. That last message made me nervous. When Finn said you're going to die, it could mean anything from he found a really good restaurant to he had done something that was going to get us both arrested. With Finn, there was genuinely no middle ground. He had been my best friend since university, and in that time he had talked me into a spontaneous trip to Amsterdam, convinced me to quit a job I hated by sending my resignation letter before I could change my mind, and most relevantly, started a successful menswear lingerie brand called Sincerely, Finn that had somehow taken off in a way neither of us had fully anticipated. He designed underwear and loungewear for men that walked the line between tasteful and devastating, and people apparently loved it, because he had 40,000 followers and a waiting list. He was also, without question, the worst possible influence on me. I got through the rest of the afternoon on autopilot. Declan's 1:30 ran over by 20 minutes, which meant his 3 o'clock had to be pushed, which meant I spent 45 minutes on the phone untangling his schedule with the patience of someone who had accepted their fate. At 5 he walked past my desk without looking at me, shrugged his coat on in one clean motion, and said, I need the Henderson brief on my desk on Monday by 8, before disappearing into the elevator. Finn showed up at my apartment at 6:15 with a bottle of wine in one hand and a black gift bag in the other, and the expression of a man who had been planning something for weeks. Happy birthday, he said, kissing my cheek and walking in without being invited, which was simply how Finn operated. What's in the bag? I asked, eyeing it. Wine first. He was already in my kitchen finding glasses. How was work? How was he? I dropped onto my couch. He told me he needed a brief by 8 Monday morning. On my birthday. Without saying happy birthday or thank you, or acknowledging that I am a human person. Finn appeared with 2 glasses and handed me one. And you still want to climb him like a tree. I hate you. You love me. He sat down and pulled his legs under him. Okay, gift time. He held out the black bag with both hands like he was presenting something sacred. I reached inside and pulled out a box. Matte black, simple logo. Sincerely, Finn. I looked at him. He was trying very hard not to smile. I opened the box. Inside was a set. A very nice set. A very nice, very minimal, very much designed to make someone look like a snack kind of set. Deep navy, soft fabric. The kind of thing that left very little to the imagination, while somehow remaining tasteful. Finn's signature. Finn. You're welcome. Why? Because, he said, sipping his wine with the composure of a man who had rehearsed this. You have been in love with your boss for 8 months, and you have done absolutely nothing about it, and I am tired of watching you suffer in silence. So, consider this a push. A push. I repeated. Take a picture. Send it to him. Tell him how you feel. Shoot your shot, Liam. The worst he can say is no. He could also fire me. Also possible, Finn agreed cheerfully. I looked at the set in the box. I looked at Finn. I looked at the set again. Absolutely not, I said. 2 glasses of wine later, I was standing in my bedroom in the set, which fit annoyingly well because Finn knew my size by heart after years of gifting me his samples, holding my phone and having what I can only describe as a moment of temporary insanity. I was not going to send anything to Declan. Obviously. That was insane. That was career-ending, earth-shattering, never recovering from it insane. But maybe I could send a picture to Finn. Just to show him. Just to ask his opinion. Just to be brave in a very small, very contained, very private way. I took the picture. I opened our text thread. I typed, "Do you think my boss will bend me over his desk if I wear this?" I pressed send. I set my phone down on the dresser feeling flushed and ridiculous and oddly proud of myself for being brave even in this tiny stupid way, and then I picked my phone back up to see if Finn had responded, and the world stopped. The text had not gone to Finn. The contact at the top of the screen, with the little delivered tick sitting beneath my message like a tiny monument to my own destruction, was not Finn. It was Declan Reeves. I stopped breathing. The delivered tick turned to read. The phone dropped out of my hand. It hit the bedroom floor with a crack that I felt somewhere deep in my chest, and I stood there, frozen, staring at it like it was a grenade that had already had its pin pulled. The screen was still lit. The message was still there. The little red receipt was still there, sitting beneath my words like a tiny, cheerful confirmation of my complete and total destruction. Do you think he will bend me over his desk if I wear this? Delivered. Read. To my boss. To Declan Reeves. To the man who signed my paychecks and had never once said thank you and had gray eyes that looked straight through people and who was, at this exact moment, somewhere in the city reading a text from his personal assistant that was accompanied by a picture of said personal assistant in a navy lingerie set asking if he would bend him over his desk. I picked the phone up off the floor with both hands. I opened the text thread. I stared at it for a very long time. Then I did the only rational thing available to me. I called Finn. He picked up on the second ring, still at my apartment, presumably still on my couch with my wine. "Did you send it?" he asked immediately. His voice had the particular quality of someone who already suspected the answer was going to be extraordinary. "Finn." My voice came out very small and very flat. A pause. "Liam." I sent it to the wrong person. Silence. "Finn." I sent it to Declan. The silence stretched for another 2 seconds, and then Finn absolutely lost his mind. Not in the sympathetic way. In the way where I could hear him pressing his face into my couch cushions to muffle the sound, which meant he was laughing so hard he couldn't breathe, which was deeply unhelpful, and also exactly what I should have expected. "This is not funny," I said. "It's," he wheezed. "Liam, it's a little." "It is not funny, Finn." He read it. "There's a read receipt. He has seen the picture and the caption, and I am standing in your lingerie in my bedroom, and I think I'm going to pass out." That sobered him up slightly. I heard him sit up and take a breath. Okay. Listen to me." "I'm listening." "Maybe," Finn said carefully. "This is for the best." I stared at the wall. "I'm sorry. You've been pining after this man for 8 months, Liam. 8 months. And you would never have sent anything intentionally because you're you and you would have talked yourself out of it 17 times. So maybe the universe did not do this, Finn. You did this. You gave me the set and the wine and the dare, and now my boss has seen me in lingerie, and I asked him if he would bend me over his desk, and I'm going to have to hand in my resignation and move to another country. You're being dramatic. Am I? Am I being dramatic? A little bit, yes. A pause. Has he responded? I looked at the screen. No new messages. Just my text sitting there in its little bubble, read and unanswered. No. See. Maybe he's going to pretend it never happened. Maybe you can both just mutually agree to never speak of it and move on. I latched onto that thought like it was a life raft. You think? Absolutely. Men do it all the time. Awkward thing happens, nobody acknowledges it, life continues. It's basically a whole system. I exhaled slowly. Okay. I looked at the text one more time. Then I locked my phone and set it face down on the dresser. Okay. Yes. I'm going to pretend I never sent it, and he's going to pretend he never received it, and Monday morning I will walk in there, and everything will be completely normal. Exactly, Finn said. Normal. Professional. Like nothing happened. Like nothing happened. Because nothing happened. Nothing happened, Finn agreed, with the gentle tone of someone who absolutely did not believe that but was choosing to be supportive. I changed out of the set with the energy of someone dismantling evidence at a crime scene, folded it back into the box, and put it at the very back of my wardrobe where I would never have to look at it again. Nothing happened. Monday morning arrived with the particular cruelty of all Monday mornings. Too bright, too soon, completely indifferent to the fact that I had barely slept in 2 days. I had spent Saturday convincing myself it was fine. I had spent Sunday less convinced. I had spent Sunday night lying on my back staring at the ceiling running through every possible scenario, the most likely of which remained that Declan had seen the message, been mildly confused or mildly disgusted, and filed it away in a mental folder labeled things I will never acknowledge alongside every other uncomfortable human experience he seemed to move through without being touched by. He was good at that, being untouched. I told myself that was going to save me. I walked into the office at 8:45, which was 15 minutes earlier than required because I needed the extra time to arrange my face into something that resembled a normal person. I put his coffee on his desk. Black, no sugar. I laid out his morning files in the order he preferred, checked his calendar, confirmed his 9 o'clock, and returned to my desk and sat down and opened my laptop and was completely, entirely, professionally normal. He arrived at 9 on the dot. I heard the elevator, heard his footsteps, kept my eyes on my screen. Morning, I said, which was what I said every morning. He said nothing, which was what he did every morning. I almost relaxed. The morning passed. I managed his calls, redirected 2 emails, ordered his lunch, and smiled at Karen from accounting when she stopped by my desk to chat. I was fine. I was completely fine. Whatever happened on Friday night was a closed chapter, a sealed vault, a thing that existed in another dimension entirely. At 2:15 my intercom buzzed. Liam. Yes. My office. I froze for exactly 3 seconds. Then I stood up, smoothed my trousers, picked up my notebook because holding something made me feel more professional, and walked to his office door. I knocked once. Come in. I came in. Declan was behind his desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbow, looking at something on his screen. He didn't look up immediately, which he sometimes did when he was making a point, and I stood there in front of his desk and waited, and tried to look like a person who had definitely not sent their boss a lingerie selfie 72 hours ago. He looked up. His gray eyes met mine, and I felt my stomach drop directly through the floor. Sit down, he said. I sat. He looked at me for a moment in that way he had, steady, unreadable, like he was doing calculations behind his eyes that he would never share the results of. Then he folded his hands on the desk. Is there anything you'd like to say to me? He asked. My brain short-circuited. I started. Stopped. Started again. About what? One eyebrow lifted. Just slightly. About anything. And I don't know what happened. I genuinely cannot explain the neurological event that occurred in my body in that moment, except that the silence stretched and his eyes stayed steady and something in me just collapsed. Oh my God, I heard myself say. That text was not for you. I need you to know that first and foremost it was absolutely not intended for you. It was meant for my friend Finn, who you've never met, and who gave me the... It doesn't matter what he gave me, the point is I was texting him, and I was not wearing. I was wearing it, but only because... And the caption sounds bad, I know it sounds bad, but it was a question for Finn, not a question for you, obviously, because I would never... I've thought about it, not like that, I just mean... I stopped, closed my mouth, opened it again. I'm so sorry. Please don't fire me. Declan stared at me. The silence was enormous. Do you, he said slowly, have another boss? Besides me? I blinked. What? Another boss. Someone else who employs you. Because the text said, he tilted his head slightly. Do you think my boss will bend me over his desk? So I'm wondering who else you might have been referring to. My face was on fire. I know. I don't have another boss. Finn was asking me to be brave, and I took the picture, and I was going to ask his opinion, and I sent it to the wrong contact. It was an accident. Declan nodded slowly. Like he was processing this. Like he was a completely reasonable man having a completely normal conversation. So, he said, you'd like me to ignore it? Yes. Please. Pretend it never happened. I will be forever grateful. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he leaned back in his chair and something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, not quite amusement, something more complicated and more dangerous than either. I have a different proposal, he said. I went very still. Sorry, you're aware of the situation with the press. I was. Vaguely. There had been things in the tabloids, whispers around the office. Something about his personal life, someone from his past. I hadn't paid close attention because it felt like none of my business. Somewhat, I said carefully. Someone I was involved with previously, he said, his voice smooth and completely controlled. Left. Got married. The press has decided this means I am. A pause, like the words tasted bad. Unable to move on. It's becoming a distraction. For the company. For me. I nodded slowly, not sure where this was going. I need that narrative to change, Declan said. I need to be seen with someone. Publicly. Consistently enough that the story shifts. His gray eyes held mine without wavering. Agree to that. Be seen with me, attend a handful of events, play the part convincingly. And I will forget the text ever existed. Every last word of it. The room was very quiet. You want me, I said slowly, to fake date you. I want you to help me manage a PR problem, he said, which was the most Declan Reeves way of saying yes I had ever heard. I stared at him. He stared back. Completely calm. Completely unreadable. Like he was asking me to reschedule a meeting and not to pretend to be in a relationship with him while I was already actually in love with him. Which was a detail I was choosing not to examine right now. And the text, I said. You'll never bring it up again? It will cease to exist, he said simply. I thought about it for exactly 4 seconds, which was 4 seconds longer than I should have given how obvious my answer was always going to be. Okay, I said. Declan nodded once. Like we had agreed on a lunch order. Good, he said. Clear my Thursday evening. We'll start then. I stood, clutching my notebook, and walked to the door on legs that felt only partially real. I had my hand on the door handle when he spoke again. Liam. I turned. He was already looking back at his screen. But the corner of his mouth, just barely, just for a fraction of a second, twitched. Close the door on your way out. I closed the door. I stood in the hallway outside his office and pressed my back against the wall and stared at the ceiling and thought about how I had walked in there to survive a professional catastrophe and somehow walked out having agreed to fake date my boss who I was already in love with. I texted Finn. Me. You are never going to believe what just happened. Finn, tell me everything. I looked at the closed office door one more time. This, I thought, is either the best or worst thing that has ever happened to me. Knowing my luck, it was probably both. Thursday evening arrived faster than I was prepared for. I had spent the 3 days between Monday's meeting and now oscillating between 2 very distinct emotional states. The first was a calm, rational, professional assessment of the situation. This was a business arrangement, a transaction, a simple exchange of services that happened to involve pretending to be romantically involved with the most attractive man I had ever been in close proximity to. Perfectly manageable. People did stranger things for job security. The second emotional state was complete and total hysteria, which was frankly more accurate. Finn had not helped. When I told him everything, the office, the conversation, the proposal, he had gone so quiet for so long that I thought the call had dropped. Then he said very softly, Liam, baby. The universe is absolutely unhinged, and I love it so much. Then he spent the next hour coaching me like I was an athlete preparing for competition, which mostly involved him saying things like, maintain eye contact, and laugh at his jokes even if they're not funny, and for the love of God, do not tell him you love him before the third fake date minimum. Very helpful. Truly. Declan had his driver pick me up at 7. I had agonized over what to wear for approximately 2 hours before Finn showed up uninvited and picked an outfit for me in 4 minutes flat. Dark trousers, a fitted black shirt, simple and clean. You look devastating, Finn said, straightening my collar. Try not to combust. The car was quiet and expensive smelling, and Declan was already inside when I got in, which meant I had approximately 4 seconds to arrange my face before I was sitting next to him in a space that suddenly felt much smaller than any car had a right to be. He looked, annoyingly, unfairly, almost offensively good. Dark jacket, no tie, the top button of his shirt undone in a way that felt like a personal attack. He glanced at me when I sat down with that steady gray gaze and said, "You're on time," which from Declan Reeves was basically a standing ovation. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Dinner. There will be photographers outside. When we arrive, I need you to stay close." A pause. "Can you do that?" "I work for you," I said. Staying close is basically my entire job description. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite amusement. Getting there. Fair point. The restaurant was the kind of place that had no prices on the menu and lighting so dim it felt like a confession booth. The moment we stepped out of the car, I understood what he meant about photographers. There were 2 of them across the street, unhurried, the long lenses of their cameras catching the light. Declan placed his hand on the small of my back as we walked to the entrance, and I am not exaggerating when I say my entire nervous system misfired simultaneously. His hand was warm and steady, and it sat there like it belonged there, like this was something we had done 100 times. And I walked through the restaurant entrance focusing very hard on putting one foot in front of the other like a functional human being. We were seated at a corner table. Intimate. Candlelit. The kind of table that did not help my situation at all. For the first 10 minutes, we were both very professional about it. He looked at the menu. I looked at the menu. We ordered. He talked about a deal his company was working on with the measured efficiency of a man conducting a board meeting, and I responded with the attentiveness of someone who was absolutely not thinking about how the candlelight did something extraordinary to his jaw. Then something happened. The waiter brought bread and Declan reached for a piece at the same moment I did, and our hands met in the bread basket, and we both stopped. A fraction of a second, that was all. His eyes came up to mine, and for just a moment the boardroom efficiency dropped away entirely, and there was something underneath it, unguarded, almost surprised, that I had never seen on his face before. He pulled his hand back. "Sorry," I said automatically. "Don't be," he said quietly. We ate. We talked. And somewhere between the starter and the main course something shifted in a way I couldn't quite name. The conversation loosened, moved away from business, became something that felt dangerously close to real. I found out he had studied architecture before switching to business, which explained the way he always noticed buildings. He found out I had wanted to be a writer in university, which I regretted telling him immediately because he looked at me with this expression like he was recalibrating something. "Why didn't you?" he asked. "Practical reasons," I said. "That's not an answer." I looked at him across the table. The candle between us flickered. "I was afraid," I said more honestly than I intended to. It felt too exposed. Putting something real on a page where anyone could read it. Declan was quiet for a moment. "I understand that," he said, and the way he said it, low and considered, like he was admitting something, made me feel like we had just exchanged something significant without either of us quite meaning to. Outside, when we left, the photographers were still there. Declan's hand found the small of my back again, warmer this time, more settled, and I matched my pace to his without thinking about it. Then he stopped walking. I looked up at him. He was looking at the cameras, calculating, the way he always calculated, and then he looked down at me and said very quietly, "Give me your hand." I gave him my hand. His fingers closed around mine, warm and certain and completely unhurried. And he held it the way you hold something you intend to keep. Not performative, not stiff. Just held it. And we walked to the car like that, his hand around mine, and I stared straight ahead and thought about absolutely nothing, because if I thought about anything at all, I was going to give myself away completely. In the car, he let go. The city moved past the windows. Neither of us spoke for a moment. "You did well," he said finally. I turned to look at him. He was looking out the window, his profile clean and unreadable in the passing light. "Thank you," I said, which was ironic because he never said it to me, but here I was, grateful for the performance review. "Same time next week," he said. "There's a charity event. More cameras, more people. It will need to look more established by then." "More established," I repeated. "Meaning?" He turned to look at me then, and in the low light of the car his gray eyes were darker, more complicated. "Meaning comfortable," he said. "Like we know each other." "We do know each other," I thought. "I know you take your coffee black with no sugar, and you press 2 fingers to your temple when meetings go badly, and you studied architecture once, and somewhere underneath all of that composure something hurt you badly enough that you built walls around it and called them personality traits." "Myself. I can do comfortable," I said. He nodded and looked back out the window. I looked at my hand in my lap. The one he had held. I could still feel the warmth of it, the weight of his fingers. I pressed my palm flat against my thigh and told myself very firmly that this was a transaction. An arrangement. A clean professional exchange. I was so thoroughly, completely, absolutely lying to myself. The charity event the following week was bigger. A grand ballroom, 200 people, the kind of event where everyone was dressed beautifully and nobody was entirely being themselves. Declan collected me from the lobby, looked at me once in the way that made my thoughts scatter, and said, "You look good," with the same tone he used when a report exceeded expectations. I almost said "you too" like a normal person, and instead said "thank you. The lighting in here is very forgiving," which made absolutely no sense, and which he ignored entirely. We moved through the room together, and it was easier this time. More natural. I knew how to match his pace now, when to step in and when to let him lead a conversation, when to put my hand on his arm, and when to just stand close enough that the message was clear. He introduced me to people. Not as his assistant, just as Liam, with his hand resting at my back and his eyes returning to me in the pauses between conversations in a way that I was probably imagining. Halfway through the evening, he brought me a glass of wine without being asked. I stared at it. "What?" he said. "Nothing," I said. "Thank you." He looked at me for a second too long. Then he looked away. Later, during a lull between conversations, we ended up standing slightly apart from the crowd, near a window overlooking the city. He was quiet in that particular way of his. Not uncomfortable, just interior, like he had retreated somewhere behind his eyes. "Are you okay?" I asked before I could stop myself. He looked at me. Surprised, I think, though it was hard to tell with him. "I'm fine," he said. "You don't have to be," I said quietly. "Fine, I mean. Not with me." Something crossed his face. Fast, like a cloud shadow. He looked back out at the city and for a long moment said nothing, and I thought I had overstepped, pushed too far into something that wasn't mine to touch. Then he said very quietly, "I used to come to things like this with someone." I didn't say anything. I just stood next to him and waited. "It was a long time ago," he said, which I didn't think was entirely true but which I didn't challenge. "What was he like?" I asked carefully. A pause. "He was," Declan stopped. Jaw tightened slightly. "It doesn't matter what he was like." "Okay," I said softly. He looked at me sideways. That unguarded thing again. The thing that appeared sometimes when he wasn't quite prepared for it. "You're not going to push?" "No," I said. "You'll tell me what you want to tell me when you want to tell me." He looked at me for a long moment. Something in his expression did something complicated and quiet that I didn't have a name for yet. Then his hand found mine again. Not for the cameras this time. We were tucked against the window, half hidden by the crowd. Nobody was watching us particularly. He just found my hand and held it, the same way as before, warm and certain, and looked back out at the city. My heart was doing something completely unacceptable. We stood like that for a long time. The party moved and murmured around us, and the city glittered outside the glass, and his hand held mine like it was the most natural thing in the world, and I stood very still and thought I am in so much trouble. Not the career-ending kind. The much worse kind. The kind that meant something. In the car on the way home he was quiet again, but differently quiet. Softer somehow. Less armored. "Same time next week?" I asked when the car stopped outside my building. He looked at me. "Yes," he said. Then, after a pause that lasted exactly long enough to make my heart do something stupid. "Get some sleep, Liam." I got out of the car. I stood on the pavement and watched the car pull away, and then I went upstairs and called Finn and said absolutely nothing for 5 seconds. "Liam," Finn said carefully. "I'm so in love with him, Finn," I said. "I'm so completely in love with him, and this is going to destroy me. Finn was quiet for a moment. Yeah, he said gently. I know, babe. I sat down on my kitchen floor and leaned against the cabinet and stared at the ceiling. Outside, somewhere in the city, Declan Reeves was being driven home alone. And I wondered, dangerously, foolishly, helplessly, if his hand felt as empty as mine did. The thing about falling for someone who had already been broken by someone else was that you could see the cracks if you looked closely enough. I had been looking closely for weeks now. It was in the way Declan controlled every room he walked into, like losing control of anything was a risk he had catalogued and refused. It was in the way he never talked about his personal life to anyone, not his colleagues, not the people who had known him for years, nobody. It was in the way he sometimes went very still and very quiet at certain songs or certain places or certain moments that seemed ordinary to everyone else but clearly weren't to him. Someone had done a thorough and precise job of teaching Declan Reeves that opening up led to loss. I thought about that a lot. I also thought about his hand in mine at the charity event, which was less productive but significantly harder to stop. We had settled into a rhythm over the past few weeks that felt dangerously good. Thursday evenings, occasional weekends, a lunch here and there where the cameras were likely to catch us. In between we were still us, him at his desk, me at mine, coffee black, no sugar, briefs by 8, schedules managed, not a word about any of it. But something had shifted in the texture of the silence between us. It was warmer now, less like distance and more like something being held carefully. He had started saying good morning. Not every day, not with any particular fanfare. But sometimes when he walked past my desk, he said it. Just those 2 words, quiet and unhurried, like they weren't a significant departure from 8 months of nothing. They were a very significant departure from 8 months of nothing. Finn pointed out, correctly, that I was absolutely gone. You light up when you talk about him. Finn told me over coffee one Saturday morning. Not in the pining way anymore. In the real way. The this person matters way. It's fake, I said into my coffee cup. Liam. It's an arrangement. Liam. He needed a PR solution, and I needed him to forget the most embarrassing moment of my entire life, and we made a deal, and that's all it. Liam. Finn put his cup down and looked at me with the patience of someone who had been my best friend for a decade, and had therefore developed an extraordinary tolerance for my self-deception. When he held your hand at the window, was that for the cameras? I said nothing. That's what I thought, Finn said, and picked his cup back up. The gala was Victor's idea. Or rather, Victor's presence at the gala was not an accident, which I only understood later. It was the biggest event we had attended together. A fundraiser for some arts foundation that Declan's company sponsored, held in a venue that was all marble floors and cathedral ceilings, and the particular smell of old money and fresh flowers. I wore a dark green shirt that Finn had selected with the focus of a military strategist, and Declan looked at me when he collected me from the lobby and said nothing for a beat too long before saying, "Let's go," in a voice that was slightly less even than usual, which I filed away in the part of my brain dedicated entirely to Declan-related information. The first hour was fine. Better than fine. We were good at this now. The easy closeness, the way I leaned slightly toward him in conversations, the way his hand found my back without either of us having to think about it. People believed us. I could see it in the way they looked at us, the way they smiled, the way a woman called Margaret who sat on the foundation board squeezed my arm and said, "It's so lovely to see Declan happy," in a way that made something in my chest ache quietly. Then I felt Declan go still. Not tense exactly. More like evacuated. Like something had left him very suddenly, and what remained was perfectly constructed and utterly hollow. I followed his gaze. Across the room, speaking to a group near the bar, was a man. He was handsome in a polished, deliberate way, tall, dark-haired, well-dressed, with the ease of someone who had always been comfortable in rooms like this. He was laughing at something, and his laugh was practiced, and his hand was resting on the arm of the man beside him, and something about the way Declan looked at him told me everything I needed to know. Victor. It had to be. Declan, I said quietly. I see him, he said. 2 words. Completely flat. Do you want to leave? A pause. His jaw tightened. No. Which was the wrong answer, and I knew it, and he knew it, and neither of us said so. For the next 40 minutes Declan was present in the way that a very convincing painting of a person is present. He spoke when spoken to, smiled when required, stood close to me, and played the part with the mechanical precision of someone who had decided to feel absolutely nothing and was succeeding through sheer force of will. I kept my hand in his and matched his composure, and pretended not to notice that his thumb had stopped moving against my knuckles the way it had started doing weeks ago without either of us acknowledging it. Victor found us, of course. Because of course he did. Declan. His voice was smooth and warm and proprietary in a way that made my skin prickle. He looked at Declan the way you look at something you used to own. Victor. Declan's voice was a locked door. Victor's eyes moved to me with a smile that didn't reach anywhere near his eyes. And you must be the new, a pause just long enough to be intentional, assistant. Liam, I said pleasantly. Right. The smile stayed exactly where it was. How lovely. The conversation lasted 4 minutes and was perfectly civil and absolutely brutal underneath the civility, the way these things always are. Victor talked about a project he was working on, asked after mutual acquaintances, said nothing that could be objected to, and everything that was designed to remind Declan of what used to be. And Declan stood there and took it with his locked door expression, and I held his hand and felt him not holding mine back the same way, and there was nothing I could do. When Victor drifted back toward the bar, he touched Declan's arm briefly as he went. A goodbye that lasted a second too long. Declan said nothing. I excused myself quietly to find the restroom, needing 30 seconds of air that didn't feel like it was pressing in from all sides. The corridor outside the main hall was quieter, cooler, lined with doors. I stood near a window and breathed and told myself I was fine. I was fine. This was an arrangement. I had always known that. I had always known that whatever Declan carried inside him was not mine to touch, and that at the end of this, whenever the end was, I would go back to being his assistant, and he would go back to being my boss, and the hand-holding would stop, and I would manage it because I was good at managing things. I was completely fine. You know it won't last. I turned around. Victor was standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, the practiced smile completely gone now. Just him, stripped of the performance, and somehow that was worse. Sorry, I said carefully. Whatever this is. He gestured vaguely in the direction of the hall. With Declan. It won't last. I kept my voice even. I don't think that's your business. Probably not, he agreed pleasantly. But I know him. Better than you do. Better than anyone does. He tilted his head slightly. He doesn't let people in. Not really. Whatever you think is happening between you, whatever he's made you feel, it's a performance. It's what he does when he wants something. Something cold moved through me that I refused to show on my face. He's good at it, Victor continued, conversationally, almost kindly, which was the most insidious version of cruelty. Making you feel like you're the only one who sees him. Like you're getting something nobody else gets. He did it to me too. A pause. And then when he's done needing whatever you're giving him, the door closes. And it stays closed. I looked at him for a long moment. Are you telling me this? I said quietly. Because you're concerned about me? Or because you're standing across a room from him and you can't stand that he moved on? Something flickered in Victor's expression. Fast and quickly buried. The smile came back, thinner this time. Just some friendly advice, he said. He walked back toward the hall. I stood in the corridor and breathed and tried very hard not to let his words do what they were doing, which was finding every small doubt I had been carefully not looking at and illuminating them all at once. It's a performance. It's what he does when he wants something. The hand at the window. Not for the cameras. I had been so sure. Whatever you think is happening between you. The good mornings. The wine he brought without being asked. The way he looked at me sometimes like he was recalculating something. When he's done needing whatever you're giving him, the door closes. I went back into the hall. Declan was where I had left him, speaking to someone I didn't recognize, and he looked up when I came back and something in his face shifted. Relief almost quickly controlled, and he reached for my hand automatically. I let him take it, but something was different now. Something had moved in me that I couldn't move back. We left an hour later. In the car I was quiet in a way that was different from my usual quiet, and I could feel him noticing it, feel his eyes on the side of my face with that calculating attention he gave everything. What happened? He asked. Nothing, I said. I'm tired. A pause. Liam. I'm fine, Declan. He was quiet for a moment. Victor said something to you. It wasn't a question. I looked at him. His expression was unreadable as ever, but there was something working underneath it, something careful and taut. It doesn't matter, I said. It clearly does. Declan. What did he say? I looked at him in the low light of the car, and I thought about all of it. 8 months of invisible, the accidental text, the fake arrangement, the hand holding that maybe meant nothing, The good mornings that maybe were just good manners, and Victor's smooth voice in the corridor telling me I was a function, not a feeling. I said carefully, that when you're done needing what someone's giving you, you close the door and it stays closed. I paused. I need to know if this is real. Any of it. Or if I've been. I stopped. Swallowed. It's fine if it isn't. That was the deal. I just need to know. The car was very quiet. Declan looked at me, and for once I couldn't read him at all. Not the jaw, not the eyes, not the set of his mouth. He was completely closed, and I sat there in the silence, waiting and feeling very exposed and very stupid. And then he said, "Nothing." He looked away. Out the window. His profile clean and unreadable, and closed as a locked room. And that silence, that careful, controlled, devastating silence, was the only answer I got. The car stopped outside my building. "Good night, Declan," I said quietly. I got out. I didn't look back. Upstairs, I sat on my kitchen floor again. The same spot as after the charity event, the same cabinet, the same ceiling. And this time I didn't call Finn. I just sat there in the quiet of my apartment and felt the specific particular pain of someone who had known better and done it anyway. His hand around mine, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I pressed my palm flat against my knee and closed my eyes. Outside, the city went on without me. And I wondered if this time, the car had kept driving. I called in sick on Tuesday. I never called in sick. In 8 months of working for Declan Reeves, I had shown up with a head cold. Shown up during a thunderstorm that flooded half the city's transport. Shown up the morning after Finn's birthday celebration, when I had approximately 3 hours of sleep and a profound regret about tequila. I showed up because showing up was what I did. It was the one thing I was completely reliable about. Tuesday, I sent a 2-line email at 7:45 saying I wasn't feeling well and would be working remotely, and then I put my phone face down on my nightstand and stared at my ceiling for a very long time. Finn came over uninvited at 11, which I should have anticipated. He let himself in with the spare key I had made him 3 years ago, and which I was now reconsidering, came into my bedroom, looked at me still in bed with the expression of a doctor assessing a patient, and said, "How bad?" "Medium," I said. "Scale of 1 to you cried on the kitchen floor." "Kitchen floor adjacent," I admitted. He sat on the edge of my bed and handed me the coffee he had apparently stopped to buy on the way, which was the most Finn thing he had ever done, and which almost made me cry again for entirely different reasons. "Tell me," he said. I told him. All of it, Victor in the corridor, the things he said, the car ride home, the question I asked, and the silence I got back. Finn listened without interrupting, which was rare enough that it told me he understood the weight of it. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "The silence," he said slowly. "You're sure it was?" "It was the answer, Finn." "Or," Finn said carefully, "it was a man who has spent years building walls around himself, having them rattled all at once, and not knowing what to do with that." I looked at him. "I'm not making excuses for him," Finn said. "He should have said something. He should have." He paused. "But Liam, you told me yourself. He studied architecture and became a businessman because it was practical. He gives you good mornings like they're something precious. He brought you wine without being asked." A pause. "He held your hand at a window when no one was watching." I pressed my lips together. "That's not a man performing," Finn said quietly. "That's a man who doesn't know what to do with what he's feeling because the last time he felt it someone left." I stared at my coffee cup. "It doesn't matter," I said. "Even if you're right," he still said nothing. "And I can't, Finn, I can't keep doing this and not know. I can't keep holding his hand and pretending it doesn't mean everything to me. I'd rather go back to invisible." Finn nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "Then you tell him that." I just told him in the car, and he. Not in a car at night after a horrible evening with his terrible ex in the room. Finn gave me a look. "You tell him properly. Clearly. And then whatever he does with it is on him." He squeezed my knee. "But you don't get to disappear without giving him the chance to be brave first." I thought about that for a long time after Finn left. I went back to work on Wednesday. Declan was already in his office when I arrived. I put his coffee on my desk. I didn't bring it through, just left it where I left it and sent him an email that it was there, which was not what I normally did. I answered his calls and managed his schedule and responded to his intercom in a voice that was professional and pleasant and gave nothing away. He called me into his office at 11. I picked up my notebook. I knocked once. "Come in." He was standing this time, not sitting, which was unusual. standing near the window with his hands in his pockets, looking out at the city. He turned when I came in and looked at me with something on his face that I hadn't seen before. Not the locked door, not the calculating quiet. Something more unsettled than either of those. "You didn't bring my coffee," he said. "I emailed you that it was on my desk," I said. "You could have collected it." A pause. "You always bring it through." "I know," I said. He looked at me steadily. I looked back with the same steadiness and waited and told myself that whatever happened in the next few minutes I would be fine. I had been invisible before. I could be invisible again. "I owe you an answer," he said. My heart did something very inconvenient. I kept my face completely still. "You don't owe me anything. The arrangement. This isn't about the arrangement." His voice was quiet and deliberate in a way that made the room feel smaller. "You asked me a question in the car, and I didn't answer it, and I need you to know that the silence wasn't." He stopped. His jaw worked slightly. "It wasn't indifference. I waited. It was another stop." He turned back to the window briefly, and I watched him do something I had never seen him do before, which was struggle. Not with a problem or a decision or a negotiation. With himself. With whatever was behind the locked door that Victor had spent years on the other side of, and had walked away from and left bolted shut from the outside. "I don't do this well," he said finally, still half turned to the window. "Saying things. Feeling things and then saying them." He paused. "I did it once. I was thorough about it. And it turned out to be the most expensive thing I ever did." "I know," I said softly. He turned to look at me. "Victor talked to you." "He did." "What did he tell you?" "That you close the door when you're done," I said. "That what you make people feel isn't real." Something moved across his face. Sharp and quickly controlled. "And you believed him." "I didn't want to," I said honestly. "But you didn't give me anything else to hold on to." He crossed the room. Not quickly. Declan never did anything quickly, always measured, always deliberate. But he crossed the room and stopped in front of me close enough that I had to look up to meet his eyes, and the gray of them was darker than usual, more open than I had ever seen them. The walls down in a way that made him look younger and more dangerous all at once. "The hand at the window," he said quietly. "Was that a performance?" My breath caught. "No," I said. "The wine. The good mornings." His voice was very low. "Were those a performance?" "Those were yours," I said. "I didn't." "I know." Something in his expression shifted into something soft and certain and entirely undisguised. "They weren't performances, Liam. None of it was." A pause. "Not from the beginning." The room was absolutely silent. "Victor left," Declan said quietly. "And I decided very efficiently, very thoroughly, that I was done. That whatever that had been, whatever I had felt, I would not be." He paused. That exposed again. "I was very committed to that decision. And then," I said barely above a whisper, "and then my assistant sent me a text that was not meant for me," he said, and the corner of his mouth moved. "Just barely. Just a fraction. And I sat in my office for 2 days trying to decide what to do with the fact that I couldn't stop thinking about it. About him." I stared at him. "You propositioned me with a fake date," I said faintly. "I needed a reason to spend time with you that had nothing to do with coffee and briefs and schedule management," he said. "It was the best I could do on short notice." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it, startled and genuine and slightly overwhelmed. And something in his face opened up completely at the sound of it, like it was something he had been waiting for. "That is the most Declan Reeves thing you have ever said to me," I managed. "I'm aware," he said. A pause. "I'm sorry about the car. I wanted to answer you. I didn't know," he stopped. Started again. "I don't want to say it wrong. I don't want to say something and then not be able to." His jaw tightened slightly. "I'm not good at halfway, Liam. If I say it, I mean it completely, and that is..." He exhaled slowly. "That's a significant thing for me. To mean something completely." I looked at him standing in front of me with his walls down and his gray eyes open, and 8 months of black coffee, no sugar, and not a single thank you and good mornings like they were something precious, and a hand at a window when nobody was watching. "Then mean it completely," I said softly. "I can hold it. I promise." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he lifted his hand and tucked a finger gently under my chin, tilting my face up, and the touch was so careful and so deliberate that my eyes stung slightly with the tenderness of it. "I think," he said quietly, "that I have been in love with you since approximately the 4th month. When you told me my 2 o'clock was already rescheduled before I noticed the email. And you said you're welcome to an empty corridor. I let out a breath that was almost a laugh and almost something else entirely. You heard that. I hear everything, he said. I just don't always know what to do with it. Declan, I said. Liam, he said back, in a voice I had never heard from him before, unhurried and warm and completely unguarded, my name in his mouth like it meant something. He kissed me. Softly. Deliberately. The way he did everything, measured and certain and thorough, like he had decided and was not changing his mind. His hand curved around my jaw and mine found the front of his shirt, and the whole city existed outside his office window, and neither of us was paying it the slightest attention. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. His eyes were closed for a moment, which I had never seen before, and he looked peaceful. Quietly, carefully peaceful, like something that had been braced for a long time had finally been allowed to rest. For the record, I said against the small space between us, I have been in love with you for considerably longer than 4 months. He opened his eyes. How long? Embarrassingly long. Tell me. Approximately always, I said. His mouth curved. Not the fraction of a twitch I had spent months cataloging. A full, genuine, unhurried smile that I had never seen on his face before, and that did something completely catastrophic to my ability to function. I'm going to need you to do that more often, I informed him. Do what? Smile. Like that. With your whole face. He looked at me with the smile still there, softer now, something private and warm in it that I understood was mine. You'll have to give me reasons. I can do that, I said. He kissed me again, slower this time, his thumb tracing along my jaw in a way that made every thought I had ever had dissolve completely. And outside the city, went on being the city, and somewhere across town Finn was probably already somehow sensing that something momentous had occurred and drafting a very long and extremely dramatic text, and none of it mattered at all. His hand found mine. Warm and certain. Not for any cameras. Not for any narrative. Not for anything except the simple quiet fact of it. I held on. Later, much later, after the coffee had gone cold and the afternoon had slipped away entirely and Karen from accounting had knocked on the office door, seen us, made a sound like a small surprised bird, and retreated very quickly, I was back at my desk. The intercom buzzed. Liam. I smiled at my screen. Yes. A pause. Small. Just long enough to mean something. Thank you, Declan said. For the coffee this morning. I looked at the intercom. 8 months. Not once. And now, quietly, privately, just for me, there it was. You're welcome, I said. And this time, someone was listening. 6 months later. The thing about Declan Reeves that nobody in his office knew, nobody except me, was that on Sunday mornings he was an entirely different person. Not at his desk. Not in his suits. Not behind the locked door expression that boardrooms and journalists and difficult clients got. On Sunday mornings he was in a gray t-shirt that was slightly too worn to be respectable and reading glasses he would deny owning if asked, sitting at the kitchen island of his apartment with the newspaper spread open in front of him, one hand wrapped around his coffee mug, occasionally reading something out loud to me that he found interesting or absurd or both. I had decided approximately 3 Sundays in that this version of Declan Reeves was my favorite thing in the world. This article says that office romances reduce workplace productivity by 30%, he said, not looking up from the paper. That tracks, I said from the couch, not looking up from my book. He turned a page. Although I'd argue my productivity has increased significantly since. You literally gave me a raise, I said. You deserved a raise independent of. Declan. You did, he said with complete composure. I put my book down and looked at him over the back of the couch. He was already looking at me over the top of his reading glasses with that expression. The private warm one. The one that was mine. The one I still hadn't fully gotten used to and suspected I never would. You gave me a raise 2 weeks after we got together, I said. Coincidence. It was not a coincidence. Correlation does not imply. Declan. The corner of his mouth moved. Then the whole mouth. The full genuine smile that still did catastrophic things to my ability to think clearly even 6 months in. He looked back at his newspaper like he hadn't just dismantled me completely. I went back to my book. This was us. This was what we were on Sunday mornings and Tuesday evenings and Thursday nights when he cooked, badly, enthusiastically, with the focus of a man attacking a problem. And I sat on the kitchen counter and talked him through recipes he refused to fully follow. This was what we were when we walked to the coffee shop on his street, and he held my hand on the pavement without thinking about it, The way you do something that has become so natural it doesn't require a decision anymore. I thought about that sometimes. How something that had started as a transaction, a deal struck in his office over an accidental text and a lingerie set and a favor owed, had become the most real thing in my life. Finn came for dinner on Saturday. He arrived with wine and the energy of someone who had been waiting to be smug about something for 6 months and had exercised extraordinary restraint in not being more smug sooner. He shook Declan's hand at the door with the expression of a man meeting someone he had heard an enormous amount about, which he had, because I told Finn everything. Declan, for his part, looked at Finn with the expression of a man who had also heard an enormous amount, because I told Declan everything too. "So you're the one who gave him the set," Declan said. Finn's smile was enormous. "Guilty. Then I suppose I owe you something," Declan said, which was the closest he was ever going to get to saying thank you to someone for accidentally engineering his own happiness, and which Finn absolutely understood and appreciated. "Just keep him happy," Finn said simply. Declan looked at me across the room. Something quiet and certain in it. "That's the plan," he said. Dinner was good. Finn was his best self, funny and warm and only moderately chaotic, and Declan, who I had been slightly nervous about in a social setting with someone who knew me this well, was himself. Dry and precise and occasionally surprising. And by the end of the evening Finn was laughing at something Declan had said with the genuine surprised laugh he only produced when something was actually funny, and I sat at that dinner table between my best friend and the man I loved and felt so full of something good and ordinary and real that it was almost dizzying. After Finn left, Declan stood at the sink washing up, and I dried and we didn't talk much, just existed in the comfortable quiet that we had always been good at, even before, even when it was just desks and briefs and coffee. "He's good," Declan said, handing me a glass to dry. "He's the best," I said. "Even when he's terrible." "He loves you very much," Declan said. Simply like a fact. "Yeah," I said. "He does." Declan handed me another glass, and our fingers overlapped on the stem for a moment, and he didn't pull his hand back, just let the overlap stay, looking at the sink with the quiet expression he had when he was thinking something he was deciding whether to say. "What?" I said. "Nothing," he said. "Declan." He was quiet for another moment. Then, "I'm glad the text went to the wrong person." I looked at him. He was still looking at the sink, but the corner of his mouth was doing the thing, and his ears, I had recently discovered, went slightly pink when he said something sincere that cost him something, and they were slightly pink now. "Me too," I said softly. He handed me the last glass. I dried it. Outside his kitchen window the city was doing its Saturday night thing. Lit up and loud, and completely indifferent to the small private happiness happening 11 floors above it. The following Monday, I was at my desk at 8:45 with his coffee in front of me. Black, no sugar. Same as always. Except, I stared at the mug. Then I went back to the kitchen, opened the cupboard, and did something I had never done in 8 months of making this man's coffee. I added 2 sugars. I put it on his desk before he arrived. He came in at 9. Jacket, briefcase, the particular focused energy of a man with a full Monday ahead of him. He sat down. He reached for the coffee. He took a sip. He stopped. Looked at the mug. Looked at me through the open office door, where I was sitting at my desk looking at my screen with the carefully neutral expression of someone who was absolutely not watching. "Liam," he said. "Yes." A pause. "There's sugar in this." "I know," I said. Another pause. Longer. I could feel him looking at me with that gray gaze, even without seeing it. "2," he said. The silence stretched for a moment. Then, very quietly, in a voice that was dry and warm and entirely his. "Don't change anything else." I smiled at my screen. "Wouldn't dream of it," I said. And somewhere in his office, I knew without looking, Declan Reeves was smiling too.